I stood at the back of Mountain View Cemetery, watching them lower my son into the ground, and all I felt was anger. Not grief. Not the crushing weight of loss that everyone expected from a father burying his 28-year-old boy. Just pure burning anger at Dylan Patterson. The kid who'd spent 15 years making my life hell and had the audacity to end it all on some damn motorcycle. At 3 in the morning. The pastor was saying something about Dylan finding peace, but I wasn't listening. I was thinking about the call I'd gotten from Denver General at 4:17 a.m. "Mr. Patterson, I'm afraid there's been an accident involving your son." Like it was the first time. Hell, it wasn't even the 10th time. Behind me, I could hear my sister Margaret crying softly. She'd always had a soft spot for Dylan, always made excuses for his behavior. "He's just lost, George," she'd say. "He needs understanding, not tough love." Understanding. Right. I'd given him understanding for years, and where had it gotten us? Patterson Telecommunications didn't build itself. 43 years I'd poured into that company, starting with a single cell tower outside Pueblo and growing it into a $200 million empire. 43 years of 16-hour days, missed dinners, and sacrificed weekends. Also, Dylan could have everything I never had growing up in Kansas. The best schools, the finest opportunities, a clear path to success. And what had he done with it? Drugs at 16. Arrested for possession at 18. 3 different colleges, 3 expulsions, a DUI at 21 that cost me $50,000 in legal fees. Rehab twice, both times checking himself out early. Then the fighting, the arrests, the nights I'd get calls from downtown Denver asking me to bail out my troubled son. The last time we spoke was 3 months ago. He'd called asking for money again. Always money, and I'd finally said no. "You want something from me, Dylan? Earn it. Show me you can hold a job for more than 6 weeks. Show me you can stay clean for more than a month. Then we'll talk." He'd hung up on me. Just like that. No goodbye, no argument, just the dial tone echoing in my ear. Now here I was, 70 years old, standing in the Colorado sunshine watching dirt fall on my only child's casket. The preacher finished his speech, people started moving toward their cars, and I realized something that should have terrified me but didn't. I felt nothing. Not loss, not regret, just emptiness. Margaret approached, her makeup smeared from crying. "George, honey, are you okay?" "I'm fine." The lie came easily. I'd been telling it for 2 years anyway, ever since Dr. Rodriguez had used words like aggressive and metastasized and 18 months if we're optimistic. "You don't have to be strong right now," she whispered. "Nobody expects—" I said I'm fine. I straightened my black tie, the same one I'd worn to board meetings for 20 years. "I need to take care of his apartment." "Pack up his things." Margaret nodded reluctantly. She knew better than to push me when I used that tone. It was the same voice that had closed million-dollar deals and fired executives who couldn't deliver results. 2 hours later, I stood in Dylan's cramped studio apartment on Capitol Hill, surrounded by the debris of his wasted life. Empty beer bottles lined the windowsill. Clothes were scattered across the unmade bed. The place smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. I started with the obvious stuff. Trash bags for the clothes nobody would want, boxes for the few things worth keeping. His motorcycle gear was still in the corner where he'd left it Wednesday night. The irony wasn't lost on me that the kid who'd never shown responsibility for anything had been meticulous about maintaining that damn bike. I was clearing out the bedroom closet when I found it. A shoebox pushed way back behind old jackets and concert t-shirts. It was heavier than it should have been, and when I pulled off the lid, my hands froze. Letters. Dozens of them, all in Dylan's handwriting, all addressed to me. The paper was worn soft from handling, and some were dated years ago. The top one was dated just last week. My name was written across the front in careful script. Dad. I sat down hard on his unmade bed, holding that letter like it might explode in my hands. In 15 years of fighting and disappointment and mutual resentment, Dylan had never once called me Dad. I couldn't bring myself to open that first letter yet. Instead, I sat there remembering when things went wrong between us. Dylan had been 8 when I bought him his first computer, a top-of-the-line gateway that cost more than most people made in a month. He'd spent hours learning programming languages, building little websites, asking me endless questions about how telecommunications worked. Back then, he'd light up whenever I came home from the office. "Dad, look what I made," he'd say, pulling me to his desk to show off some new creation. His eyes would shine with pride when I praised his work, and I'd think, this kid's going to take over Patterson Telecommunications someday. He's going to be better than I ever was. The shift started when he turned 13. Suddenly, everything I did embarrassed him. My success, my expectations, even my presence at his school events. I remember parent-teacher conferences where Mrs. Henderson would tell me Dylan was brilliant but unmotivated, that he had tremendous potential if he'd just apply himself. I knew what that meant. I'd been hearing it about underperforming employees for years. So I did what I always did with underperformers. I raised the bar. "Dylan, you're capable of straight A's. Why am I looking at a C in mathematics? It's just one grade, Dad. One grade becomes a pattern. Patterns become habits. Habits become failures." I thought I was teaching him excellence. Looking back, maybe I was teaching him that nothing he did would ever be good enough. High school was when our relationship truly went to hell. Dylan started hanging around with kids from the wrong side of Aurora. Kids whose parents didn't own telecommunications empires or summer homes in Vail. He'd come home smelling like cigarettes, his grades slipping, his attitude getting worse by the week. The first real fight happened when he was 16. I'd found marijuana in his backpack while looking for a permission slip he'd forgotten to give me. "What the hell is this?" I'd demanded, holding up the plastic baggie. Dylan had looked at me with those dark eyes, his mother's eyes, and shrugged. "What's it look like?" "It looks like you're throwing your life away for no damn reason." Maybe I don't want the life you picked out for me. That's when I made my first big mistake. Instead of asking him what he did want, I doubled down. Grounded him for 2 months. Took away his computer, his phone, his car privileges. Made him come straight to the office after school so I could watch him do homework. He complied, but something died in him during those 2 months. The kid who used to be excited to see me became sullen and distant. He did his homework, but mechanically. He answered my questions, but with the minimum number of words possible. When the grounding ended, he was like a different person. Colder, more defiant. And I told myself he'd learned his lesson. The arrests started senior year. First, it was underage drinking at a party in Lakewood, then possession again. Then a fight outside some club downtown that left another kid with a broken nose and Dylan with a court date. Each time, I'd bail him out. Each time, I'd lecture him about responsibility and consequences. Each time, he'd nod and agree and then do something worse. "You're killing me, Dylan," I'd tell him during one of our kitchen table confrontations. "Do you understand that? Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, you're destroying it." "I never asked you to build anything for me," he'd shot back. "I never asked for any of this. You think you can just throw away every opportunity I've given you? You think success just happens by accident? Maybe I don't want your kind of success, Dad. Maybe I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on yours." That conversation haunted me for years. At the time, I'd seen it as teenage rebellion. Now, sitting in his empty apartment holding letters I was afraid to read, I wondered if he'd been trying to tell me something I was too stubborn to hear. College was supposed to fix everything. First Colorado State, then Boulder, then Metro State. Each time, the same pattern. Dylan would start strong, then gradually stop attending classes, stop turning in assignments, stop caring about anything except whatever self-destructive behavior he'd discovered that semester. The calls from deans and advisors all sounded the same. "Mr. Patterson, we need to discuss Dylan's academic performance." Translation: "Your son is failing again, and we're running out of patience." By the time he dropped out for good at 23, I was exhausted. 40 years of building Patterson Telecommunications, and my legacy was going to be a son who couldn't hold a job at a coffee shop for more than 6 weeks. That's when I made my second big mistake. I cut him off. "You want to be independent, Dylan? Fine, figure it out yourself. Don't call me unless you're ready to prove you can handle responsibility." He'd looked at me across my office desk, the same desk where I'd closed deals worth millions, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something break in his face. But then that familiar mask of indifference slid back into place. "Whatever, George," he'd said. Not Dad, George. Like I was some stranger he barely knew. And now he was gone, and I was holding letters he'd never sent, wondering if I'd spent 15 years fighting a war that nobody needed to win. My hands shook as I opened the first letter. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. Nothing like the sloppy scrawl I remembered from his school assignments. "Dear Dad, I know you think I hate you, but that's not true. I've been trying to write this letter for 3 years, and I never know how to start. How do you tell someone you love them when every conversation ends in a fight? I was thinking about when I was 8 and you bought me that gateway computer. Do you remember? You sat with me for hours teaching me DOS commands, and I felt like the luckiest kid in the world because my dad was this successful businessman who still had time to show me how computers worked. I wanted to be just like you back then. I used to practice walking around the house in dress shirts and ties, pretending I was going to important meetings. I'd sit in your office when you weren't home and imagine myself running Patterson Telecommunications someday. But then I got older and realized I wasn't smart enough to be you. Every time you'd look at my report card or ask about my grades, I could see the disappointment in your eyes. Not anger, disappointment, which was so much worse. I started acting out because at least when you were mad at me, you were paying attention. When you were disappointed, you just looked sad and distant, like you were already writing me off. I know you think I threw away every opportunity you gave me. Maybe I did, but I need you to know it wasn't because I didn't appreciate them. It was because I was terrified of failing you again. Every scholarship, every college admission, every job interview you set up for me, they all felt like tests I was guaranteed to fail, and I've never been good at taking tests I know I'm going to bomb. So I bombed them on purpose. At least that way, the failure was my choice. I'm not telling you this to make excuses. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that I never stopped loving you, even when I was acting like I hated everything you stood for. I just didn't know how to love you without disappointing you. I hope someday I'll be brave enough to give you this letter. Maybe when I figure out how to be the son you deserved all along. Dylan, P.S. I still have that gateway computer. It still works. I read the letter 3 times before the words really sank in. Then I set it aside and picked up another one. This one dated 2 years ago. Dear Dad, I saw you at King Soopers last week. You were in the pharmacy section, and you looked tired. More tired than I've ever seen you look. I almost came over to say hi, but then I remembered our last conversation and chickened out. You were reading the label on some prescription bottle, and I wanted to ask if you were okay, but I figured you probably wouldn't tell me even if you weren't. We don't really talk about personal stuff anymore. We just fight about my latest screw-up and then don't speak for months. I've been clean for 6 weeks now. No drugs, barely drinking, trying to get my act together. I got a job at a warehouse in Commerce City. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest work, and I haven't missed a day yet. I keep thinking about calling you to tell you, but what if this time is like all the other times? What if I mess up again and have to see that look on your face, the one that says you knew I'd disappoint you eventually? Sometimes I think it's better to let you assume I'm still screwing up than to risk proving you right again. I love you, Dad. I know I've never said it, but I do. I love your work ethic and your integrity and the way you built something from nothing. I love that you never give up on anything worth fighting for. I just wish I knew how to convince you that I'm worth fighting for, too. Dylan. The box contained 47 letters total. I could see dates spanning from 5 years ago right up to last week. 5 years of letters he'd written but never sent. 5 years of thoughts and feelings he'd never shared with me. I thought about that prescription bottle he'd mentioned seeing me with. That was probably the OxyContin for the pain, back when Dr. Rodriguez first started me on medication to manage the symptoms. Dylan had seen me buying cancer medication and been worried about my health, But he'd been too afraid to ask if I was okay. We'd both been protecting each other in the stupidest way possible. I picked up another letter, this one from just 8 months ago, and immediately noticed the handwriting was steadier, more confident. Dear Dad, I've been thinking about Mom lately. Weird, right? It's been 12 years since the car accident. But sometimes I'll smell her perfume on someone walking by, or I'll hear a song she used to hum, and it's like she's right there with me. I think she'd be disappointed in how we turned out, you and me. She always said the two most important men in her life needed to take better care of each other. George, she'd tell you, that boy worships you. Be gentle with his heart. And to me, she'd say, your father works so hard because he loves us, Dylan. Don't make it harder for him than it already is. We both let her down, didn't we? But I think she'd also be proud of some things. You never gave up on your company, even when the economy tanked in 2008. And I finally stopped using drugs. For real this time. It's been 4 months and I wake up every morning choosing to stay clean. I enrolled in night classes at Community College of Denver, engineering courses. Remember how I used to love building things when I was little? Turns out I still do. I'm not ready to call you yet, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to become the kind of man Mom would have been proud of. The kind of man you might be proud of too someday. Love always. Dylan. That letter broke something open in my chest. Community college. Engineering courses. 4 months clean. My son had been putting his life together and I'd had no idea. I was reaching for the next letter when I found one that made my blood run cold. The envelope was addressed in Dylan's handwriting, but someone else had written across the front, Mr. Patterson. Found this in Dylan's wallet. Thought you should have it. Officer Martinez, Denver PD. Inside was a letter dated just 2 months ago, but this one was different. This one had been carried around, folded and refolded until the creases were soft as fabric. Dear Dad, I know. I know about the cancer. I know about the appointments at Presbyterian St. Joseph every other Tuesday. I know about Dr. Rodriguez and the treatments you've been hiding for almost 2 years now. I wasn't following you or spying on you. I was at the hospital visiting Mrs. Chen from my apartment building. She had a stroke last month, and I saw you coming out of the oncology wing. You looked so small walking to your car, so tired. I asked around, made some calls. It wasn't hard to find out. When you're George Patterson, people remember you, even when you're trying to be anonymous. The thing that kills me is that you're facing this alone. Margaret doesn't know. Uncle Frank doesn't know. Nobody knows except you and your doctors, and that's exactly how you planned it, isn't it? You always were too proud to let anyone see you vulnerable. I understand why you haven't told me. What am I going to do? Drop everything and rush to your side? The son who can't hold a job or stay out of trouble? The disappointment who's been nothing but a burden for 15 years? But Dad, I need you to know something. All those times I screwed up, all those times I embarrassed you or cost you money or made you wish you'd never had a kid, none of that was because I wanted to hurt you. It was because I was scared. Scared that if I tried to be the son you wanted and failed, you'd finally give up on me completely. Scared that disappointment was the only emotion I could still get from you. Scared that if I stopped being your problem, I'd stop being anything to you at all. But mostly, I was scared that you were going to die someday, and I'd never figure out how to tell you I love you. And now, you are dying, and I still haven't figured it out. I've been clean for 7 months now. Really clean. I have a job at Morrison Construction. Union work, good pay, benefits. I've been going to meetings twice a week and seeing a counselor who's helping me understand why I spent so many years sabotaging myself. I'm getting better. Dad, not for you. I learned I had to do it for me first. But partly because I wanted to prove that your son wasn't a complete waste of space. I wanted to be someone you could be proud of before it's too late. I don't know how much time the doctors gave you. I don't know if the treatments are working, or if you're in pain, or if you're scared. I don't know any of that because we don't talk anymore, and that's mostly my fault. But I want you to know that you don't have to face this alone. If you'll let me, I want to be there. Not as your screwed-up kid who needs bailing out, but as your son who loves you. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've used up all my chances and then some. But if there's any part of you that still believes I might be worth saving, please call me. My number hasn't changed. It's 303-555-7829, same as it's been for 3 years. I love you, Dad. I should have said it a long time ago. Dylan. The letter slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. Dylan knew. He'd known about the cancer for months, and instead of confronting me or demanding information, he'd gotten his life together. 7 months clean. A good job. Counseling. He'd been trying to become the son he thought I wanted, not knowing that what I'd always wanted was just him. The real Dylan, not some perfect version I'd built up in my head. I picked up another letter, this one more recent, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unfold it. Dear Dad, 10 months clean today. 10 months since my last drink, my last hit, my last stupid decision that could have gotten me arrested. I keep waiting for you to call. Every time my phone rings, I hope it's you saying you heard I was doing better and maybe we could grab coffee somewhere. Talk like normal people instead of like adversaries planning our next battle. But I understand why you don't call. I burned too many bridges, made too many promises I couldn't keep. Why should you believe this time is different? Here's why. Because I finally understand what you were trying to teach me all those years. Excellence isn't about being perfect. It's about not giving up when you fail. It's about getting up every day and trying to be better than you were yesterday, even when yesterday was a complete disaster. You never gave up on Patterson Telecommunications, even when competitors tried to buy you out, or when technology changed faster than you could adapt. You just kept working, kept innovating, kept building something worth being proud of. That's what I'm doing now, Dad. I'm building a life worth being proud of. Not because I think it'll make you love me. I'm starting to believe you might have loved me all along, even when I was at my worst. But because I want to love myself the way you taught me to love anything worth having. I want to earn my own respect before I ask for yours. I'm enrolled in engineering school now. Real college, not some community college program. University of Colorado, Denver. I start in January. My grades from Morrison Construction got me a partial scholarship, and I've saved enough to cover the rest. I'm going to study telecommunications engineering. Dad, I want to understand the business you built, the industry you conquered. Not because I think you'll give me a job. I know I have to prove myself first, but because I want to see the world through your eyes. I want to understand what made my father great, so maybe someday I can be great too. Maybe someday, when you're ready, you'll let me try to make you proud. All my love. Dylan. I sat there on his unmade bed, surrounded by 15 years' worth of misunderstandings, and finally understood what had really been happening. Dylan hadn't been rebelling against me. He'd been protecting himself from the possibility of my rejection. And I'd been so focused on teaching him strength that I'd never shown him it was okay to be vulnerable. We'd both been keeping secrets. I'd hidden my cancer because I didn't want to burden anyone with my mortality. He'd hidden his love because he didn't want to risk losing the only parent he had left. 2 proud, stubborn men, both too afraid to admit we needed each other. The deeper I dug into the box, the more heartbroken I became. Letter after letter revealed moments when Dylan had almost reached out to me, times when he'd stood on the edge of reconciliation only to pull back at the last second. One letter, dated 18 months ago, nearly destroyed me. Dear Dad, I drove to your office building today, sat in the parking lot of Patterson Telecommunications for 2 hours, trying to work up the courage to come inside. I had it all planned out. I was going to walk up to reception, ask Linda if you had a few minutes, and then just talk to you, like a normal person. Tell you I'd been clean for 3 months. Show you my acceptance letter to CU Denver. Ask if maybe we could start over. But then I saw you through your office window on the fourth floor. You were on the phone, probably closing some $1 million deal, and you looked so professional, so successful, so far above the mess I've made of my life. And I realized I had nothing to offer you. 3 months clean, big deal. Community college acceptance. You went to Wharton. A warehouse job making $15 an hour. You built a $200 million empire. What was I going to say? Hey, Dad, I know I've been a complete disappointment for 15 years, but look, I can now pass a drug test and show up to work on time. That's not an accomplishment. That's just basic human functioning. So I drove home and wrote this letter instead. At least on paper, I can pretend to be eloquent. At least in writing, I don't stutter or say the wrong thing or see that look in your eyes that says you're already regretting giving me another chance. I love you, Dad. I wish that was enough. Dylan. I set that letter aside and picked up another one. This one from last Christmas. Dear Dad, I walked by the house today. Our old house on Cherry Creek Drive. The new owners have put up different Christmas lights, those modern LED ones instead of the big, colorful bulbs Mom always loved. Do you remember Christmas morning when I was 12? I'd gotten you that coffee mug that said, World's Greatest Dad. Probably cost me $5 at the mall, and you acted like it was the most valuable thing you'd ever received. You used that mug every morning for years. I used to feel so proud seeing it on your desk at the office, knowing that out of all the expensive gifts people gave you, you kept using the cheap one from your kid. I wonder if you still have it. I bought you a Christmas present this year. Nothing fancy, just a book about the history of telecommunications that I thought you might enjoy. It's sitting on my kitchen counter, wrapped in silver paper, and I keep staring at it like it might magically transport itself to your house. I must have picked up my phone to call you 50 times yesterday. Christmas seems like the kind of day when estranged family members are supposed to reconcile, right? When pride takes a backseat to love? But then I remember that the last time we talked, you told me not to contact you unless I was ready to prove I could handle responsibility. And maybe getting clean and staying out of jail for 8 months isn't proof enough. Maybe I need to accomplish something bigger first. Something that would make you proud to call me your son. I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying so hard to become someone worthy of your love. Merry Christmas. Dylan, the Christmas present. I looked around his apartment and found it on the kitchen counter exactly where he'd described it. Still wrapped in silver paper, a little bow on top. The tag read, To Dad, Love Dylan. Inside was a book called Connecting America. The story of telecommunications from telegraph to 5G. On the first page, Dylan had written, Dad, thank you for showing me that building something lasting takes patience, vision, and heart. Maybe someday I'll build something too. Love, Dylan. I had to put the book down and walk to his bathroom to splash cold water on my face. When I looked in the mirror, I saw an old man with red eyes and silver hair, staring back at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Regret so deep it felt like drowning. Back in the bedroom, I found a letter that made everything worse. Dear Dad, I saw Margaret at King Soopers last week. She was buying groceries, and when she saw me, her face lit up like I was still the little boy she used to babysit. Dylan, she said and hugged me right there in the produce section. How are you, honey? You look good. Healthy. I wanted to tell her everything. About being clean, about school, about the job, about how I think about you every single day. But then she asked, Have you talked to your father lately? And I had to lie. I had to tell my aunt, the woman who used to read me bedtime stories and take me to Broncos games when you were working, that no, we don't really talk anymore. She got that sad look that adults get when they're trying not to interfere in other people's family problems. You know he loves you, don't you? She said. I nodded because I do know that. Deep down, underneath all the anger and disappointment and years of fighting, I know you love me. Just like I know I love you. But knowing someone loves you and feeling loved by them are two completely different things, aren't they? Margaret told me you've been working too much lately. That you look tired all the time. She's worried about you, Dad, and she doesn't even know about the cancer. That's another thing we have in common. We're both protecting the people we love by keeping secrets from them. I almost asked her to tell you I miss you. Almost asked her to mention that I'm doing better, that maybe you could be proud of me now. But then I chickened out, because what if she told you and you didn't care? What if the son you remember is so different from the son I'm trying to become that it doesn't matter anymore? I love you, Dad, even if it's too late for that to matter. Dylan. There were dozens more letters like these. Each one showed me a moment when Dylan had almost reached out, almost called, almost showed up at my office or my house. 15 different opportunities for reconciliation that never happened, because my son was convinced he wasn't good enough to deserve my attention. The worst part was realizing that I'd created that belief. Every time I'd raised the bar higher, every time I'd demanded more without acknowledging what he'd already accomplished, every time I'd focused on his failures instead of celebrating his attempts, I'd been teaching him that my love was conditional, that he had to earn it instead of simply receiving it. And Dylan, being my son, had inherited my stubborn pride. Instead of risking rejection, he'd chosen isolation. Instead of fighting for our relationship, he'd protected himself by staying away, just like I'd been protecting myself by keeping the cancer secret. We were so much alike it was heartbreaking. The letters from the past 6 months told a completely different story. Dylan's handwriting became more confident, the paper was better quality, and the tone shifted from desperation to something I'd never seen from him before. Hope. Dear Dad, 1 year clean today. 365 days without drugs, without drinking myself stupid, without making choices that would embarrass you. I celebrated by getting promoted to crew chief at Morrison Construction. Sounds fancy, but really it just means I get to tell other guys where to dig holes for foundation work. Still, it's the first time in my life anyone's put me in charge of anything important. My supervisor, Rick Martinez, pulled me aside yesterday and said something I keep thinking about. Dylan, you've got natural leadership skills. Have you ever considered going back to school for project management? Leadership skills. Me, the kid who couldn't lead himself out of a paper bag for most of his 20s. But you know what's weird? I think Rick might be right. The other guys on the crew actually listen to me. They ask my opinion about scheduling and logistics. They trust me to make decisions that affect their work. It's nothing like running a telecommunications empire, but it's something. It's proof that I can handle responsibility when people give me the chance. I keep wanting to call you and tell you about it, but then I remember that 1 year clean probably doesn't erase 15 years of screw-ups. Not in your mind, anyway. I'm learning patience, Dad. Turns out it's something you can practice, like playing piano or throwing a football. Every day, I don't call you as practice for becoming the kind of man who deserves your respect. Even if I never get the chance to show you. Love. Dylan, the next letter was dated just 4 months ago, and the change in tone was remarkable. Dear Dad, I did something today that would have been impossible a year ago. I walked into the University of Colorado Denver admissions office and enrolled in their 4-year engineering program. Not community college, not night classes, full-time university, pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Telecommunications Engineering. My academic advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen, looked at my transcript from my previous college disasters and said, "Mr. Patterson, these grades don't reflect the person sitting in front of me today." She was right. The person sitting in her office was someone I'm still getting to know, someone who shows up on time, asks intelligent questions, and doesn't run away when things get difficult. I'm scared. Dad, terrified actually. What if I fail again? What if this time is like all the other times? And 6 months from now I'm back to making excuses and disappointing everyone. But I'm more scared of never trying. More scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to become the man you raised me to be. My first semester starts in January. I'm taking Calculus 2, Physics, Introduction to Electrical Engineering, and English Composition. 15 credit hours. Full course load. I bought all my textbooks already. They're stacked on my kitchen table, and every morning when I have coffee, I look at them and think, this is how I'm going to understand my father's world. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? I want to understand telecommunications the way you do. I want to know why you get excited about fiber optic networks and 5G infrastructure. I want to speak your language fluently instead of stumbling through conversations about things I never bothered to learn. Maybe someday, when I graduate, I'll know enough to have a real conversation with you about business. Maybe I'll even have ideas worth listening to. Maybe someday you'll look at me and see a son instead of a disappointment. I'm not asking for a job at Patterson Telecommunications. I know I have to prove myself first, probably somewhere else, doing work that has nothing to do with our family name. But Dad, I want you to know that every equation I solve, every concept I master, every A I earn, it's all dedicated to you. You're the reason I'm finally fighting for something instead of running from it. With all my love and admiration, Dylan. I had to stop reading and just sit with that for a moment. Dylan had enrolled in telecommunications engineering. He'd been preparing to understand my world, to speak my language, to finally bridge the gap between us through shared knowledge and mutual respect. The next letter was dated just 8 weeks ago. Dear Dad, midterm grades came back. I got A's in calculus and physics, a B+ in engineering, and an A in English. Dean's list for my first semester. My professor, Dr. Williams, asked me to be a teaching assistant next semester. You have an unusual ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms, he told me. Have you considered graduate school? Graduate school, Dad. Me. I keep thinking about something you used to tell me when I was little. Dylan, intelligence isn't about knowing everything. It's about figuring out what you don't know and then learning it. Turns out, I don't know a lot of things, but for the first time in my life, instead of being ashamed of that, I'm excited about it. Every gap in my knowledge is just another opportunity to grow. I'm working part-time now, just weekends at Morrison Construction, so I can focus on school during the week. It means less money, but I'm learning to live simply. Turns out you don't need much when you're spending most of your time in libraries and study groups. I made friends, Dad. Real friends, not just people to get high with. Study partners who challenge me. Professors who believe in me. Classmates who respect my opinions. For the first time since Mom passed away, I feel like I belong somewhere. I wish I could tell you about it. I wish I could show you my report card and see pride in your eyes instead of surprise. I wish you could meet Dr. Williams and hear him talk about my potential, without wondering if he's talking about the same Dylan Patterson you remember. But I'm learning to be proud of myself first. And Dad, I am proud. Proud of the man I'm becoming. Proud of the work I'm doing. Proud of finally living up to the standards you tried to teach me. I hope someday you'll be proud too. Forever, your son. Dylan. The transformation documented in these letters was staggering. Dylan hadn't just gotten clean, he'd completely rebuilt himself. New career, new friends, new goals, new sense of self-worth. He'd taken everything I'd tried to teach him about excellence and hard work and applied it systematically to his own life. And I'd missed all of it. While my son was becoming the man I'd always hoped he could be, I was nursing my anger and pride. Convinced he was still the same self-destructive kid who disappointed me for 15 years. The last letter in the sequence was dated just 2 weeks ago, and the confidence in Dylan's handwriting was unmistakable. Dear Dad, spring semester ends next week, and I'll have completed my first full year of engineering school with a 3.8 GPA. Dr. Chen has recommended me for a summer internship with a telecommunications firm in Boulder. Not Patterson Telecommunications, obviously, but a smaller company that does infrastructure consulting. It's paid, it's in my field, and it's a chance to apply everything I've been learning about the industry you mastered decades ago. I'm ready, Dad. Ready to prove that George Patterson's son can succeed in telecommunications on his own merits. ready to show you that all those years of disappointment were just preparation for this moment. I'm going to call you soon, not to ask for anything, not to make excuses for the past, just to tell you that I love you and I'm sorry it took me so long to become someone worthy of that love. I hope you'll answer. Your son, Dylan. At the very bottom of the box, folded differently from all the others, was a single piece of paper that made my heart stop. The envelope was addressed to me, but it had never been sealed. The date at the top was last Wednesday, the day Dylan passed away. Dear Dad, tomorrow. I'm going to call you tomorrow. I've been writing letters to you for 5 years and I'm tired of being a coward. I'm tired of loving you in secret, tired of being proud of my accomplishments only in private, tired of wondering if you ever think about me the way I think about you every single day. Tomorrow, I'm going to dial your number and say, Dad, it's Dylan. Can we talk? And if you hang up on me, at least I'll know I tried. If you tell me you never want to see me again, at least I'll have heard your voice one more time. If you give me a chance to explain who I've become, maybe, we can start over. I'm not the same person you remember, Dad. I know you have every reason to doubt that. But it's true. The drugs, the arrests, the constant disappointments, that wasn't me running towards something. That was me running away from the fear that I'd never be good enough to earn your love. But I'm not running anymore. I have proof now. Not just words or promises, but actual evidence that Dylan Patterson can succeed at something difficult. My transcript from CU Denver. My performance reviews from Morrison Construction. Letters of recommendation from professors who barely knew the old me, but believe completely in the new me. I want to show you everything, Dad. I want you to see what your son has accomplished when he finally stopped being afraid of failure. More than that, I want to tell you that I understand why you were so hard on me all those years. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were trying to make me stronger. And it worked, just not the way either of us expected. I had to break completely before I could rebuild myself into someone worth your pride. I know about the cancer. Dad, I've known for months, and I've been respecting your privacy because I understand why you haven't told anyone. You're protecting us from worry we can't fix, the same way you always protected us from problems you thought you should handle alone. But you don't have to handle this alone. Not anymore. I want to be there for you, Dad. Not as your screwed-up kid who needs taking care of, but as your son who loves you and wants to help carry whatever burden you're facing. I want to drive you to appointments, sit with you during treatments, bring you books to read while you wait for doctors. I want to be the kind of son who makes your life easier, not harder. I want to prove that all those years you spent believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it, weren't wasted. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell you about the internship I got with Pinnacle Communications in Boulder. It's a small firm, but they do exactly the kind of infrastructure consulting that fascinates me. The pay is decent, the work is challenging, and my supervisor used to work for Verizon. I'm going to tell you about Dr. Williams, who says I have natural aptitude for systems engineering, about the research project I'm working on regarding fiber optic efficiency in rural networks, about the paper I'm co-authoring that might get published in a telecommunications journal. I'm going to tell you about the apartment I'm looking at in Boulder. Nothing fancy, but clean and close to both the internship and campus. About how I've been sober for 18 months and attend NA meetings twice a week, not because I'm struggling, but because I never want to forget how far I've come. I'm going to tell you that I still have that coffee mug I bought you when I was 12, the world's greatest dad one. I rescued it from a box of your old office supplies when you redecorated 5 years ago. It sits on my kitchen counter, and every morning when I drink my coffee, I remember what it felt like to be your little boy who thought his father could do anything. I still think that. Dad, I think you're brilliant and strong and that you built something amazing from nothing. I think Mom would be proud of the man you became after she passed away. I think any son would be lucky to have you as a father. I hope tomorrow you'll think you're lucky to have me as a son. I'm going to tell you that I love you, Dad, that I've always loved you, even when I was too broken to show it properly. That every good thing I've accomplished in the past 2 years has been motivated by my desire to make you proud. And then I'm going to ask if you'll let me be part of your life again, not as a project you need to fix, but as family. As your son who finally grew up to be someone worth knowing. I've been scared of this conversation for months, but I'm not scared anymore. Whatever happens, at least we'll both know the truth, that George Patterson raised a son who learned to love himself the way his father loved excellence, with patience, determination, and absolute refusal to give up. See you tomorrow. Dad. All my love, always. Dylan, P.S. I'm proud to be your son. I should have told you that a long time ago. The letter fell from my hands as if it were on fire. Tomorrow. Dylan had been planning to call me tomorrow. Thursday. But Wednesday night at 11:47 p.m., he'd taken that motorcycle out for what his roommate said was just a quick ride to Clear. His head before the big conversation, he'd passed away 3 blocks from our old house on Cherry Creek Drive. The police report said he'd been driving carefully, wearing his helmet, completely sober, just a drunk driver running a red light who didn't see the motorcycle until it was too late. My son had died 12 hours before he was going to tell me he loved me. 12 hours before. I would have heard about the internship, the grades, the sobriety, the transformation. 12 hours before, I would have learned that Dylan Patterson had become exactly the kind of man I'd always hoped he could be. 12 hours before, we both would have discovered that love had been there all along, waiting underneath years of pride and misunderstanding. I sat in Dylan's apartment, surrounded by 47 letters full of love I'd never known existed, and finally understood the true meaning of tragedy. Not death itself, but all the words that go unspoken until it's too late to speak them. I spent the entire night on Dylan's floor, reading and rereading those 47 letters. By the time dawn broke through his small apartment window, I understood with perfect, devastating clarity what the last 15 years of our lives had really been about. 2 proud men, both terrified of vulnerability, both convinced they were protecting each other through silence. Dylan hadn't been rebelling against me. He'd been trying to become worthy of me. Every arrest, every failure, every self-destructive choice had been motivated by the same fear that kept me from telling him about my cancer. The fear that love comes with conditions, and we might not meet them. I thought about all the phone calls I'd ignored from numbers I didn't recognize, wondering now if any of them had been Dylan trying to reach out. I thought about the Christmas card that came to my office last year with no return address, signed only Love D. I'd thrown it away, assuming it was from some business acquaintance whose name I'd forgotten. It had been from my son. The worst part wasn't the regret, though that was crushing enough. The worst part was understanding that Dylan had solved the puzzle. In his final letter, he'd figured out how to bridge the gap between us. He'd found the courage I'd never managed to find, the words I'd never learned to say, and I'd missed it by 12 hours. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "George, how are you holding up? I know the funeral was hard. Call me if you need anything." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Can you come to Dylan's apartment? I need to show you something." She arrived 40 minutes later, still in her bathrobe, worry etched across her face. "George, what's wrong? You look terrible." I handed her Dylan's final letter without saying anything, watched her face change as she read, watched tears start streaming down her cheeks before she was halfway through. "Oh, honey," she whispered when she finished. "Oh, George, he loved you so much." "I know." My voice sounded like gravel. "I know that now. He was trying to tell you. All these years he was trying to find a way back to you." I showed her the other letters, watched her read about Dylan's sobriety, his academic success, his career progress, his desperate desire to make me proud. Watched her understand, the same way I had, that we'd all been wrong about Dylan Patterson. "George," she said finally, "you have to tell people. The family, your employees, everyone who knew Dylan, They deserve to know who he really was. I will, and I meant it. But first, I need to tell you something. Dylan wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I told her about the cancer, about the 2 years of treatments I'd hidden, the prognosis Dr. Rodriguez had given me, the reason I'd been working such long hours, not because I was driven, but because I was running out of time to secure Patterson Telecommunications' future. Margaret cried harder then, for both the son who'd died before he could prove himself and the brother who'd been facing mortality alone. "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded. "Why didn't either of you trust us enough to let us help?" "Because we're Patterson men," I said bitterly. "We handle our problems ourselves. We don't burden other people with things they can't fix." "You don't get to decide what's a burden, George. You don't get to choose whether people love you enough to carry difficult news." She was right, of course. Dylan and I had both made the same mistake. We'd tried to protect people by shutting them out, never realizing that love means sharing the hard stuff, not just the easy stuff. I spent the rest of the morning calling people. My brother Frank in Phoenix, my business partner James Sullivan, my secretary Linda, who'd known Dylan since he was 12 and always asked about him even during our worst years. Each conversation was the same: shock at the news about Dylan's transformation, followed by grief at what we'd all lost, followed by anger at me for keeping the cancer secret. "Jesus, George," Frank said over the phone, "that boy was trying to make you proud and you never gave him the chance to show you." "I know. And you've been sick for 2 years without telling anyone? What the hell is wrong with you?" "I know. You know? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Frank? That I screwed up? That I let pride ruin the most important relationship in my life? That I missed my only chance to tell my son I loved him? Because I know all of that. I've been living with that knowledge for 18 hours now." The silence on the line stretched for a long time before Frank spoke again, his voice gentler. "George, I'm sorry. I'm angry, but not at you. I'm angry at the situation, at the timing, at how unfair it all is. Dylan was going to call me, I told him, Thursday morning. He was going to tell me everything, about school, about the job, about getting clean. He was going to ask for another chance, and you would have given it to him. In a heartbeat. The second I heard his voice, I would have said yes to anything he asked for. He knew that, George. Deep down, he knew that. But that was the thing. I wasn't sure Dylan had known. His letters were full of uncertainty, full of fear that I'd reject him again. My son had died thinking he might not be good enough to earn my love, and that was something I'd have to live with for whatever time I had left. I called Dr. Rodriguez and scheduled an appointment for the following week. Not for treatment, it was too late for that to make much difference, but to discuss how much time I realistically had and what I needed to do to put my affairs in order. I was done keeping secrets. Done pretending I could handle everything alone. Done protecting people from truths they had a right to know. Dylan had taught me that, even in death. Through 47 letters full of love and honesty and courage I'd never managed to show, my son had finally taught me how to be vulnerable. That evening, I sat in my study at home, the same room where I'd refused to take Dylan's calls for the past 3 years, and started writing, not a letter to Dylan. It was too late for that, but a letter to myself, documenting everything I'd learned from his words. A promise to spend whatever time I had left living the way Dylan had been trying to live, with honesty, courage, and open-hearted love for the people who mattered. I owed him that much. I owed him the father he'd been trying so hard to reach, even if I could only be that father in memory. The memorial service I planned for Dylan bore no resemblance to the funeral we'd held a week earlier. That had been a perfunctory affair, relatives paying respects to a troubled young man who'd passed away too soon. This was a celebration of who Dylan Patterson had really been. I held it at Patterson Telecommunications, in the same conference room where I'd closed the biggest deals of my career. If Dylan had lived to call me that Thursday, this was probably where we would have met, where I would have heard about his internship and his grades and his plans for the future. Margaret helped me prepare. We printed copies of Dylan's final letter, with his permission, I believed. We displayed his academic transcripts, his performance reviews from Morrison Construction, the recommendation letters from his professors. We even brought the Christmas present he'd never given me, that book about telecommunications history with his inscription about building something lasting. But the centerpiece was something Dylan himself had created, a research paper he'd co-authored about improving fiber optic efficiency in rural networks. Dr. Williams had sent it to me after I contacted him, along with a note that said, "Mr. Patterson, your son had one of the most innovative minds I've encountered in 30 years of teaching. This paper is being considered for publication in the Journal of Telecommunications Engineering." Dylan would have been the youngest co-author in the journal's history. 23 people came to Dylan's real memorial service. My employees who remembered the bright 8-year-old who used to visit the office, Margaret and Frank and their families, Dr. Williams and 2 of Dylan's professors, Rick Martinez from Morrison Construction, who told everyone about Dylan's leadership skills and work ethic, even a few classmates from his engineering program, young people who'd known the Dylan I'd never met. I stood up to speak, my hands shaking slightly as I held the pages I'd prepared. "Most of you knew my son Dylan as someone who struggled," I began. "For 15 years, that's how I knew him too. As someone who couldn't seem to find his way, who made choices that disappointed everyone who cared about him." I paused, looking around the room at faces that reflected my own grief and regret. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Dylan wasn't lost, he was finding himself. He wasn't failing. He was learning to succeed. He wasn't pushing us away because he didn't love us. He was protecting himself because he loved us so much that the possibility of losing our love was unbearable. I told them about the letters, about 18 months of sobriety, about Dean's List grades, about the internship with Pinnacle Communications. I told them about Dylan's plan to call me, about his readiness to bridge the gap between us, about the 12 hours that changed everything. "My son spent 5 years writing me letters he was too afraid to send," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "Letters full of love and hope and determination to become the man he thought I wanted him to be. The tragedy isn't that Dylan failed. It's that he succeeded and died before either of us knew it." Rick Martinez spoke next, telling stories about Dylan's transformation at Morrison Construction. "That kid went from being someone you had to watch constantly to being someone you could trust with your life," he said. "He was the first person I'd call when we had a difficult job, because I knew Dylan would figure out how to get it done right." Dr. Williams talked about Dylan's academic potential. He approached engineering problems with intuitive understanding that typically takes years to develop. His questions in class weren't just smart, they were insightful. He saw connections other students missed. One of Dylan's classmates, a young woman named Sarah, shared a story that broke my heart in the best possible way. Dylan talked about his father constantly, about Patterson Telecommunications, about the advice his dad had given him when he was little, about how he was going to make his father proud someday. We all knew his dad was his hero, even when they weren't speaking. After the service, I announced the establishment of the Dylan Patterson Foundation for Second Chances, a scholarship fund for young adults in recovery who wanted to pursue technical education. The initial funding came from my personal accounts, $5 million to start, with more to follow. Dylan believed in the power of transformation, I told the local news reporter who covered the story. He proved that people can change, can overcome their mistakes, can become worthy of the love they've always deserved. This foundation will help other young people discover what Dylan discovered, that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. But the most important conversation happened after everyone else had left. Linda, my secretary, approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Patterson, I need to tell you something. About 3 months ago, a young man called the office asking for you. He wouldn't give his name, but he said he was your son. I told him you were in meetings all day, but he could leave a message." My heart stopped. "What did he say?" "He said, 'Tell my dad that Dylan called and that I love him, and that I'm finally becoming someone he can be proud of.'" I wrote it down word for word. But when I brought it to you, you were on that conference call with the investors in California, and then you left for Denver General, and I forgot to give it to you, Linda was crying harder now. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Patterson. I should have insisted. I should have interrupted your meeting. I should have known it was important." Linda. I put my hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. Dylan called and he said he loved me and you heard him. That's what matters." But inside I was thinking, 3 months ago. Dylan had found the courage to call 3 months ago, had left a message saying he loved me and was becoming someone I could be proud of. And I'd been too busy, too important, too focused on business to receive it. Even when Dylan had reached out directly, I'd missed him. That night, I added another paragraph to the letter I was writing to myself. "Remember that business will continue without you, but love won't wait for convenient timing. Remember that the most important calls are the ones that interrupt your meetings. Remember that pride is a luxury no father can afford when his child is trying to come home." Dylan had been trying to come home for months. I just hadn't been available to answer the door. Dr. Rodriguez was direct as always. 6 months, George. Maybe 8 if you're lucky and the new treatment works better than expected. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. 3 months had passed since Dylan's memorial service. 3 months since I discovered those 47 letters that changed everything I thought I knew about my son. In those 3 months, I'd learned to live differently. The cancer was winning, but I was no longer fighting it in secret. Margaret drove me to appointments now. Frank flew in from Phoenix once a month to help manage Patterson Telecommunications' transition to new leadership. James Sullivan, my business partner, had stepped up to handle daily operations, while I focused on what really mattered. The Dylan Patterson Foundation had already awarded its first scholarships, 12 young adults in recovery programs who were pursuing engineering, business, and technical degrees. Each scholarship recipient received not just money, but mentorship from Patterson Telecommunications employees and a copy of Dylan's research paper on fiber optic efficiency. "Your son would be proud," Dr. Williams had told me when he came to present at the Foundation's first awards ceremony. He'd be amazed to see his academic work inspiring other students who are fighting their own battles with addiction and self-doubt. I'd started speaking at NA meetings around Denver, sharing Dylan's story with people in recovery, not as the disappointed father I'd been, but as the proud father I should have been all along. "My son taught me that love isn't something you earn," I'd tell them. "It's something you receive. And then, if you're smart, you learn to give it back while you still have time." The hardest part wasn't the cancer treatments or the business transitions or even the grief. The hardest part was living with the knowledge of how close we'd come to reconciliation. Dylan's phone call to Linda, his plan to call me that Thursday morning, his careful preparation for the conversation we'd never have, it all felt like evidence of some cosmic joke. But Margaret helped me see it differently during one of our talks in the chemo infusion center. "George, you're focusing on the 12 hours you missed instead of the 28 years you had," she said, holding my hand as the IV dripped poison designed to buy me a few more months. "Dylan knew you loved him. Deep down, past all the fear and hurt, he knew. How can you be sure? Because he kept trying. For 5 years he kept writing letters. For 18 months he stayed sober. He enrolled in your field of study, got good grades, found a career path that would let him understand your world. People don't work that hard to impress someone they don't believe loves them." She was right, of course. Dylan's transformation hadn't been motivated by desperation. It had been motivated by hope. Hope that his father's love was still there, waiting to be reclaimed through worthiness and effort. I'd kept Dylan's letters in my office safe, but I'd memorized most of them by now. On difficult days, when the treatments made me too weak to work, or when the reality of my prognosis felt overwhelming, I'd recite passages to myself like prayers. "I love your work ethic and your integrity and the way you built something from nothing. I love that you never give up on anything worth fighting for. Maybe someday you'll look at me and see a son instead of a disappointment. I'm proud to be your son." I should have told you that a long time ago. Dylan had been proud to be my son. Despite 15 years of conflict, despite my criticism and impossible standards and emotional distance, my boy had been proud to carry the Patterson name. I started recording video messages, dozens of them. Messages for the Foundation's future scholarship recipients, for my employees, for my family, but mostly messages responding to Dylan's letters. All the things I should have said if I'd been brave enough to read them while he was alive to hear my responses. Dylan, this is your dad. I got your letter about being scared to call me, and I want you to know that I was scared too. Scared that I'd failed you as a father. Scared that my criticism had damaged you beyond repair. Scared that if I let myself love you openly, I'd have to admit how much I'd already lost. Dylan, you asked if I still have that coffee mug you gave me for Christmas when you were 12. I do. It's on my desk right now, and I've used it every morning for 16 years. It's the most valuable thing in this office. Dylan, you don't need to earn my love. You never did. I'm sorry I made you think otherwise. I'm sorry I confused high standards with conditional affection. I'm sorry I spent 15 years trying to make you perfect. Instead of letting you know you were already enough. Videos were for me more than anyone else, a way to have the conversations Dylan and I had missed. But Margaret suggested we include them in the Foundation's resource library for other parents who were struggling to communicate with children in recovery. Maybe you can help other families avoid the mistakes you made, she said. Maybe Dylan's story can prevent other fathers from waiting too long to say what matters. 6 weeks ago, I'd received an unexpected call from Pinnacle Communications in Boulder, the company where Dylan had been offered an internship. Mr. Patterson, we heard about your foundation and Dylan's work in telecommunications engineering. We'd like to propose something. What if we created an annual Dylan Patterson Innovation Award for the most promising undergraduate research in rural broadband solutions? Dylan's paper would be the template, and recipients would receive internships with our company. I said yes immediately. Dylan's name would be attached to cutting-edge telecommunications research for years to come. His intellectual legacy would inspire innovations he'd never lived to develop himself. Last week, I'd started my final project, a comprehensive business transition plan ensuring Patterson Telecommunications would continue to thrive under new leadership. But more importantly, I'd started writing a book, not about business strategies or industry trends, but about love and communication and the price of pride. I was calling it Letters Never Sent, a Father's Guide to Words That Matter. The introduction began, "My son Dylan died 12 hours before he planned to tell me he loved me. This book is for parents who still have time to say what matters, and for children who are waiting to hear it. Every night before bed, I read one of Dylan's letters aloud to his photograph on my nightstand, not because I thought he could hear me, but because the words deserved to be spoken. His love deserved to be acknowledged. His transformation deserved to be celebrated. Good night, son," I'd say to his picture. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the man you became. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Dylan had given me an impossible gift, the knowledge of his love, delivered after it was too late to return it in person. But not too late to honor it, not too late to share it, not too late to let his story transform other people's lives the way it had transformed mine. In my remaining months, I would make sure Dylan Patterson was remembered not as the troubled young man who died too soon, but as the brilliant, determined, loving son who conquered his demons and reached out for reconciliation with courage I'd never possessed. That was the least I could do for the boy who'd called me Dad in letters I'd never received. That was the most I could do with the time I had left.